Starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello everyone and welcome to today's webinar. Today's presentation is going to focus on the newly revised 3rd edition of the ANSI IICRC S520 Standard and Reference Guide for Professional Mold Remediation. Today your host will be Standards Director Mili Washington, Standards Chair Howie Wolf, and S520 Consensus Body Chair Jim Pearson and Vice Chair Scott Armour, who will discuss the newly revised standards and some of the primary revisions made since the 2008 edition. First up is Mili Washington.
Thank you, Jennifer. This is Mili Washington, IICRC Standards Director, and I want to just go over a little bit of the standard development process that we followed at IICRC. Our process is an ANSI-approved process for standards development, and what that essentially means is that ANSI accredits the process that we use for developing American national standards. They review and audit our procedures, and they approve our standards as procedurally compliant American national standards. They do not, on the other hand, review the technical aspects of our standards. IICRC follows ANSI's essential requirements for due process, and those are covered by the idea of openness and availability of documentation to all stakeholders, lack of dominance by any of the interest categories represented on the consensus body, balance of interest categories of the voting consensus body, providing consideration of all views and objections of stakeholders throughout the process of development, having a consensus vote, which is the vote of the consensus body on the standard, having an appeals mechanism in place for anyone that considers themselves to be an unresolved objector, and also having written procedures that outline all of our procedural requirements that are in compliance with ANSI's essential requirements. Following this process, we conducted 2 rounds of open public review on the standard and 2 rounds of open peer review on the reference guide. They were concurrently held along with the consensus body's approval ballots. The first round was in July of 2013, and the second round was in April of 2015. Each was a 45-day open public review, peer review period. We received approximately 150 comments total on the standard and the reference guide, and the consensus body then essentially reviewed, addressed, and responded to all of the comments from commenters and made changes to the standard and reference guide accordingly. We received American national approval for the S520 on October 2015 from ANSI, and IICRC then proceeded to publish the S520 in December of 2015. The title for the standard is ANSI IICRC S520 Standard. Moving on to the makeup of the consensus body membership. The chairman of S520 Consensus Body, Jim Pearson, representing Mold Inspection Services. Our vice chairman, Scott Armour, representing Armour Applied Science. Consensus body members included Bob Baker from BBJ Environmental Solutions, Cole Stanton from Fiberlock Technologies, Connie Morbach from Sanet Air, Mike McGinnis from RK Occupational and Environmental Analysis, Dave Dibdall from American Risk Management Resources Network, Lee Center from Dryit Canada, Mike Bowden from Mike Bowden Attorney at Law, Grant Dick from Genesis Restorations, and John Banter from Restoration Consultants. So that was our consensus body that reviewed, developed, and voted on the standard. And with that, I will now pass it on to S520 Chairman Jim Pearson. Jim?
Thank you, Mili. I appreciate that. We just wanted to take a few moments here and look at who the standard was developed for. And of course, our primary, I think, goal was to make it for the mold remediation industry, our companies who provide mold remediation, of course, the employees and workers for those firms. It's also designed to help indoor environmental professionals, or IEPs, and others that are investigating mold complaints, preparing the specifications, designing protocols, procedures, and managing the remediation project itself. Of course, other material interested parties like consumers, occupants or tenants, property owners, property managers, insurance companies, government and regulatory bodies would also have an interest in this standard. First thing I want to cover is that this is the standard of care. Now, standard of care means those practices that are common to reasonably prudent members of the trade, those who are recognized in the industry as qualified and competent. Contrasted to that, it is not designed to be a best practice or method or technique that has always shown results superior to those that you would get with other means. A best practice is used as a benchmark. The next level up from that is the absolute best, the state of the art, and that's the highest level of development, like a device, a technique, or a scientific field achieved at a particular time, and it's not a state of the art document either. It's a procedural standard is what the S520 is. It establishes the guidelines based on sound scientific and technical principles. All the industry information we could gather, and of course the practical experience of many people out there providing this type of service. It's a voluntary standard. It lacks the force of law or regulation. However, it can be used, for example, in a court of law to determine if the remediation company followed the standard. It's intended to provide information about mold contaminated structures, systems, and contents, and how to remediate them. And it provides the principles and the foundation for understanding our remediation practices, and because we want them to be accomplished properly. Here's what it is not, and some people have a tendency to stretch a little bit and try to apply different things to it. It's not designed to teach remediation like an instructional guide, nor is it a substitute for training and certification programs. It is not intended to be exhaustive or including all requirements. We're going to stress that a couple of times in this presentation. It doesn't cover absolutely everything, and new science is developed daily. It also does not establish procedures or criteria for assessing mold contamination in an indoor environment. That would be a completely separate issue. The standard and reference guide is actually in two parts. The first, the standard itself, is the actual standard with the requirements in it, established by due process and consensus. This is the version that describes the principles, procedures, methodology, and precautions for a given activity, where the reference guide is a supporting document that accompanies the standard normally, and it embellishes and further explains the procedures and methodologies that are in the standard. It's important to understand the, we call them trigger words, the definitions of these trigger words such as shall and should. Shall and should are the components of the standard of care. Recommended is not a component of the standard of care. May and can denotes permissive or possible action that could be taken. We talk a lot about professional judgment in the document, and it's not intended, as I said earlier, to be exhaustive or all-inclusive. Restorers need to use professional judgment on each and every project because every project is different. However, the use of professional judgment is not a license to not comply with the standard. Projects have unique circumstances, and they can infrequently allow for a deviation from the standard. But prior to deviating from this standard of care, the standard of care, of course, being shall or should, the restorer should document the circumstances that led him to such a decision, tell the material interested parties, and in the absence of timely objection, for example, they're not there, then document this communication before proceeding. You want to protect yourself. Now we want to get to the most important part I think that everyone's interested in, and that's how did we change it? What did we do to improve it? Well, now the reference guide is separated from the standard for the purposes of the ANSI review. They only have one document to go through now, and that'll make the process a lot quicker. The documents are more streamlined, easier for the user to use. We also wanted the document to be more acceptable worldwide to various countries, and we wanted to make it more compliant with the global harmonization system. So we've included international measurements and other information. We've enhanced the rules for negative pressure containments used in sensitive environments, such as retirement homes, hospitals, daycare centers, etc. Between the time the last standard was published in 2008 and this one, the EPA has refined their RRP program, Renovation, Repair, and Painting, in dealing with lead-based paints and coatings. So that has been clarified. Also, temperature extremes, either hot or cold, should not be used as an alternative to cleaning procedures and the physical removal of mold contamination. There's been a lot of different ideas pop up that maybe heat can do it, maybe cold can do it, but no, it's not an alternative to proper cleaning procedures. We downgraded the text related to misting. It's now less stringent on the requirements for misting because some of us do use misting in construction projects to keep dust down, and so that portion has been downgraded. However, we beefed up the fact that remediators should not mist disinfectants or sanitizers to try to kill mold in lieu of source removal. Must remove the source. A very important portion and usually boring to people is the insurance information, but this is most critical. We've found that many restoration companies are not properly covered with their insurance policies to cover their actual mold remediation work. So we've updated pollution exclusions, described adequate coverage for doing mold work, and added the recommendation of professional liability coverage when we recommend things or render an opinion on something about mold. Another change was it's recommended that the HVAC system not be used for dehumidification or drying during a mold remediation project. Some folks were using dehumidification through the HVAC system, and it accomplishes a nice diffusion of the mold throughout the property, so we're not recommending that at all. And of course, all the references and definitions have been updated in the document. Now, there was always some question as to the EIP, how it's related to the remediator. The EIP is an assessor or inspector, and it says now that remediators may perform post-remediation evaluation after their own jobs. IEPs can provide post-remediation verification, or PRV. There is a difference. If the IEP conducts assessment, or the PRV, and is not independent from the remediator, the same person, for example, they should disclose in writing to the client that they are deviating from the standard. This is an enhancement that wasn't in the document before. If you're going to inspect your own job that you've done, you want to disclose in writing to the client that you're deviating from the standard by not having an IEP conduct the PRV. Now, if the IEP is conducting any activity such as assessment, post-remediation verification, and he or she is not independent from the remediator, they should disclose this complexity in writing to the client that they are deviating from the standard. If the project involves post-remediation verification by an IEP, it should be conducted prior to the application of coatings. That includes repair coatings, sealants, resurfacers, because the IEP will need to see if the mold is physically removed. Okay, now we're going to go to how you get a copy of the S520, and Mili, would you like to take that, or possibly Howie?
Okay.
Okay, this is Mili Washington back again. Thanks, Jim. Just a couple of links here for how to access the newly revised S520 standard. The IICRC web store would be your first stop. The link is simply webstore.iicrc.org, and on this site we have all current historical standards listed, as well as options for our new standard subscriptions. We have a couple of different options available to you. We have the basic subscription, which essentially provides annual online access to all of IICRC's current standards. And we have the premium subscription access, which provides you access to all of IICRC standards, current and historical, for online viewing on an annual basis. So, you know, the current standards, the historical standards, as well as subscription access and bulk and bundle discounts are all available from the webstore.iicrc.org website. Just a little bit about our subscriptions. As I mentioned, they have online access and full text search capability. So you can search for a word or a phrase, and the subscription site will pull up the term or phrase in all of our standards. One can also log in and access your content on any device. So it's basically an online access that you can access on any tablet, phone, or computer. It also allows you to do a note-taking on your content and save it, so the next time you log in, you would have access to the notes that you made on your previous session. So it's a very new and effective tool for accessing standards anywhere and on any device. So that would be what we would encourage, in addition to our individual standards that are available on the web store website. A little bit about the future of the S520 and what we see coming down over the next few months and years. One of the requirements of American national standards that are ANSI approved is that they must be reviewed and revised on a 5-year cycle, and the idea behind that is to keep the scientific content up to date and relevant, and so that is our intent, is to revise the S520 on a periodical basis of approximately every 5 years and provide revisions on that basis. Additionally, we are working on translating the S520 standard into French, and we expect that to be completed and available in the first quarter of 2016. In addition to that, we also are scheduling a 2-day technical seminar in April 2016 in Atlanta. The dates are to be determined, but essentially it will provide instructional videos on the entire standard, and it will be held by the S520 Consensus Body members. And finally, also as part of that same meeting, which is the technical conference that IICRC will be putting up in April in Atlanta, we will also have a technical panel on the S520 with members from the consensus body present at the panel to answer questions. And with that, just wanted to provide contact information for myself, Mili Washington. My email is Mili, M-I-L-I, at iicrc.org, and our website address is there as well, iicrc.org/standards. So if there are any questions, please reach out to me and I'd be happy to help. And with that, just want to thank our presenters today, Jim Pearson, S520 Consensus Body Chairman, as well as Scott Armour, S520 Vice Chairman, and Howie Wolf, IICRC